Welcome, everyone. First, I hope everyone is healthy and safe and doing what they need to do to stay that way. My name is Andrea Ray, and I have the pleasure to serve as the President CEO at the Seattle Southside Chamber. And on behalf of our board and staff, welcome to our first Pacific Northwest Sustainability Summit. We're fortunate to bring together subject matter experts, industry leaders, business owners, and community members to provide insight into the relationship between our businesses and the environment. This event is focused on both celebrating and encouraging businesses of all sizes to seek out sustainable business practices to support a strong environment and safeguard against climate change. As we begin our gathering, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that our event today, although virtual, is taking place on occupied Coast Salish land and that the Seattle Southside Chamber is on the homelands of the Duwamish people. We pay respect to Coast Salish elders, past and present, and extend that respect to their descendants and all Indigenous people. Thank you. This is a Zoom webinar. For our guests joining us through Zoom, you are not able to share your screen or unmute yourself, but you can type your questions into the Q&A function when we get to that Q&A part of the program, and Chamber staff and myself will facilitate that Q&A session. If you are joining us live through Facebook, hello and welcome. You can also participate and ask questions of our speakers and panelists just by typing in those questions in the comments section, and we will do our best to get to those as well. Wanted to just give a brief overview about why we are here today. And we are here because nearly 6 out of 10 businesses are more engaged with sustainability than they were 2 years ago. 70% of responders to a survey by McKinsey indicated that their company has some form of sustainability governance, which is up 54% from just 3 years previous. However, until we are at 100% with sustainability governance in place, we see an opportunity to lead and guide our business community into creating and encouraging greater environmental responsibility. Many of our local businesses have discovered that through implementing sustainable business practices, that they are not only lowering their carbon footprint, but also increasing their profitability. We're looking forward to digging in a little deeper and learning more about that today. So again, thank you for being here. This copyrighted webinar is presented by the Seattle Southside Chamber of Commerce and may not be reproduced or retransmitted in any form without the express written consent of the Chamber. Today, we will walk you through a keynote address about why sustainability matters with the Nature Conservancy. We'll also have a panel discussion about sustainable business practices featuring our subject matter experts. Following that panel, we'll have a great Q&A session so that we can answer your questions and help you move towards more sustainable business practices. We'll also draw a door prize winner at 12:55, and I promise you we will be out of here no later than 1 p.m. I want to just take a moment to thank our presenting sponsor, the Port of Seattle. We're so honored that Commissioner Calkins is here with us this morning. Ryan Calkins was elected to the Port of Seattle Commission in 2017. Commissioner Calkins focuses on sustainable economic development at the Port of Seattle, working to ensure that our region's prosperity is shared among all of our communities. Ryan balances current needs with a long-term vision for the port to ensure that our region's most valuable public assets will continue to thrive for generations to come. He also works as a nonprofit professional at Ventures, a charitable organization that supports low-income entrepreneurs to start and grow their businesses in the Puget Sound area. Please welcome Commissioner Calkins.
Good morning, and thank you, Andrea. You're an incredible leader for the Seattle Southside Chamber of Commerce, and we really appreciate how well connected you are with the port. You've even participated in some of our tree planting projects around the airport, which we really appreciate too. The Seattle Southside Chamber has been one of the best places to connect with South King County communities. We look forward to kicking off 2021 with our partners at the Highline Forum. First meeting of this year is this afternoon. We continue to face real challenges in our economy, particularly in tourism. You live this every day. The slowdown at the airport has significantly reduced economic activity in these communities. But I want to congratulate Southside businesses for your response. We see the data that hotels near the airport are outperforming downtown and east side hotels on revenue and occupancy, for example. You're hustling, you're developing new business, exploring new business opportunities, and creating growth at a very difficult time. Tourism will be an important part of economic recovery, and the port is supporting efforts to safely return to pre-pandemic levels. We give annual grants to destinations around the state. We partner with cities on their own economic development strategies, which often include tourism projects like the Des Moines Marina. We offer very inexpensive tourism advertising at the airport through our Spotlight program. And last year, the Commission authorized spending $1.5 million on a more robust tourism campaign, which will launch this year, just as vaccine distribution begins to accelerate. And let's be honest, with the extraordinary wildland spaces in our region, it's not hard to sell what the Pacific Northwest offers. Today, we are here to talk about how sustainability is good business. As a small business owner myself, I was an early adopter of this concept, establishing sustainability criteria for our tile and stone business in 2006 that were then used as a model for industry-wide standards. Here at the port, we embody that principle as well. Being a green gateway is our commitment to making this a profitable proposition. And while it does require an investment on our part, it creates opportunities for you as a business leader and also as a leader in your community. One example is our South King County Fund, a commitment to award $10 million to address airport noise, environmental health, sustainability, and economic development in the county's most diverse and most culturally diverse communities. This program builds on the Airport Community Ecology Grant Program, which successfully funded more than 42 projects worth over $365,000 in Burien, Des Moines, and SeaTac. We've now expanded the community investment effort with our South King County Fund Environmental Grants Program, which supports public space improvements, equipment or artwork installations, or neighborhood or environmental stewardship projects in Burien, Des Moines, Federal Way, Normandy Park, SeaTac, and Tukwila. We'll be announcing the first round of recipients on February 9th. In response to COVID and the urgent need for economic activity, last year the Commission expanded the purpose of the South King County Fund to also invest in economic development. In December, we announced nearly $1 million in grants to 10 organizations representing and serving South King County's most diverse communities to provide workforce development programs. The largest investments we make in sustainability come through our capital projects, and these are also business opportunities for local vendors. We've installed solar projects at 2 of our maritime facilities using local companies for installation and even some of the manufacturing. We built the new North Satellite with the latest water conservation technology, so we can use collected rainwater to flush toilets. We continue to require our taxis and TNCs like Uber and Lyft to reduce emissions through more efficient vehicles, which saves money for those drivers. And we just received a grant to install 10 new EV charging stations in our holding lot for TNC drivers needing to charge their vehicle. We'll also install 94 new EV stations, along with the 48 existing stations in our public parking garage. We also launched our new sustainable project framework to ensure that all capital projects reduce emissions and environmental impacts, including using building materials such as concrete and steel with lower life cycle or, quote, embodied carbon emissions. Finally, I want to mention a $23 million 10-year contract we signed last year to secure renewable natural gas made from municipal solid waste, the garbage collected from our homes and businesses each week. We are using the RNG to heat the terminal and power buses at the airport. This contract cuts our carbon emissions in half, an incredible achievement. To make the contract even better for our region, we'd like to purchase that RNG locally, but we've got a regulatory hurdle to overcome to do that. The Washington legislature will consider the low carbon fuel standard this year, which would help create a market for more locally produced RNG. This has been the port's top legislative priority for a few years in a row. A low carbon fuel standard will create incentives for regional manufacturers to produce and sell fuel here in Washington. Low carbon fuels cut pollution and improve air quality. Investment in clean fuels production will create jobs all around our region. At the airport, it would also take us a step closer to our goal of a 10% blend of sustainable aviation fuels by 2027. This matters for communities like ours, by significantly reducing local air pollution. I encourage you to contact your legislators about the importance of an LCFS for airport communities. As an aside, many of you may be tracking the State Commission considering the siting of a second major airport. In their recent report, they delayed their timeline on announcing a recommendation since the pandemic has created uncertainty around passenger demand. However, they did encourage the use of SAF as a means of reducing impact on near airport communities in the interim. I want to say thank you again to Andrea for inviting the port to be a part of this incredibly worthwhile summit. My hope is that when the port hosts the annual State of the Airport with chamber members later this year, we'll be able to do so in person. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Commissioner Calkins. Yes, we all have our fingers crossed on being in person soon. So again, appreciate you being here and thank you so much. We also want to thank our presenting sponsor, Recology King County, where they are working to move beyond waste to ensure every community they operate in, whether it's Washington, California, or Oregon, are able to be leaders in resource recovery and invest in a greener future. Thank you to Recology King County. Thank you also to our media sponsor, South King Media. Scott and Teresa Schaefer have been tireless advocates for our community even before they joined the chamber back in 2008. As a small business themselves, they are dedicated to helping other small businesses grow, as well as keeping our community connected and informed. Scott is broadcasting this event live on Facebook so that even more in our community are able to watch with us and ask questions. We are also recording this event so that those that aren't able to join live can still have access to this information later at their convenience. Again, thank you so much to our sponsors, and thank you, our audience, for joining us virtually today. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Jesse Israel. Jesse acts as the Puget Sound Conservation Director for the Nature Conservancy. In addition to leading their work to clean up and restore Puget Sound, she is also the chief architect for advancing work in urban areas. A fourth-generation Seattleite, she is well positioned to help make our cities more resilient and livable, as well as develop natural solutions to stormwater pollution. Jessie has spent more than a decade working with King County, where she has led teams whose work represents the future of how organizations can best serve the needs of people and the environment in urban areas. Most recently, she has been the Resource Recovery Section Manager for King County Wastewater Utility, and prior to that, the Business Development and Partnership Section Manager for King County Parks. A common theme throughout her career has been leading organizations through strategic planning, adaptive growth, and innovation for conservation and the environment. As a public servant, consultant, and nonprofit leader, Jessie has a 20-year track record of bringing together groups to invest in local community development, environmental, and equity issues. She has trained around the world on building public-private partnerships and developing sustainable communities. Jessie has a long history of community service and has served on the boards of the Great City, Ballard Food Bank, City Year, and Women's Political Caucus. She has also spent more than 2 years as a volunteer with the United States Peace Corps in rural Ghana, West Africa, and has a BA in political science from Seattle University. Jessie, I can't think of anyone more prepared for us to lead us in this discussion this morning. So again, thank you so much for being here. Take it away.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. And today I'm coming to you from the Nature Conservancy, and thank you so much for going into such a detailed bio. Gosh, I'd forgotten much of that stuff about myself. I work for the Nature Conservancy as the Puget Sound Conservation Director, and the Nature Conservancy, many of you know, we're the largest conservation organization in the world. We really work at the nexus of people and nature, and many folks know us for protecting, over our 50-year history, protecting the world's last best places. And a few years ago, we realized as a global organization that we really couldn't work at the nexus of people and nature if we weren't working on climate issues and if we weren't working in cities. So we really have more recently folded our climate and our cities work into our practice. I am a fourth generation Seattleite, Washingtonian, raising the fifth. I come from Norwegian fishermen and Sephardic fish sellers who sold fish at Coleman Pier I've spent a career working at the nexus of people and the environment. And so the challenge for cities in a world of climate change, in a world of all the other things going on, is very near and dear to my heart. People are moving to cities faster than ever. How we deal with that growth, coupled with climate impacts, the need to right some disturbing legacy health inequities and environmental racism. These are the challenges of coastal communities like ours. The Puget Sound, in terms of water volume, is the largest estuary in the nation. It's a very special place, as many of you know. We have orca off of our downtown coastline, salmon heading home to spawn in our urban creeks, native cultures that have fished in these waters for thousands of years. And what we do here really matters and can ignite a new way, a new culture around conservation. The beauty of Puget Sound, though, hides a deepening problem. This place we really love is getting sicker faster than it's getting better. And despite lots of work over the last 20 years by a multitude of organizations and governments, we're facing this triple threat right now of climate change, COVID-19, systemic racism, and all of these things really accelerate our challenges related to clean water and the need to invest in resiliency, equity, and economic recovery. I tend to think of the climate change and the water cycle are really linked, joined at the hip. In a future of climate change, we're going to see what I like to think of as this triple whammy of water-related impacts in coastal communities like ours, where increased snowpack melt will bring more water down into our communities. Increased precipitation and increased sea level rise mean more flood events, more warming temperatures, significant increase in wildfires. Our communities are going to be inundated with water when we don't want it and aren't going to have enough water when we do. The five warmest years on record have all occurred since 2015. In 2016, we experienced the hottest year on record, and the climate crisis is really going to affect all of the Earth's interrelated life support systems: our air, our water, and our land. Southern resident killer whales are on the course to extinction. The impacts of climate change and the pollution from our cities in the last 150 years of development have really impacted them the most. They're the most polluted mammal on the planet. And those ecological impacts also are linked to our own human health. Toxic chemicals persist through the food web, reducing fishing opportunities, but they also threaten our health, and sometimes disproportionately for Indigenous or minority communities. And this translates to millions of dollars of healthcare costs. As I said, wetter winters, sea level rise, drier summers, all are going to make our communities feel different. All of the pollution from our cities lands on the landscape, and our rain, which is kind of iconic to our region, washes all that pollution into our lakes, rivers, and streams. And I'll say, not unlike other places in the country, race is still the most significant predictor if you live near contaminated air, water, and soil. It's our pollution heat mapping and environmental health disparities map show that overburdened populations have historically bared the brunt of our environmental health disparities, and in the future will bear the brunt of climate impacts. Businesses and risk to business will manifest itself in a lot of different ways as well. Transportation corridors, supply chain impacts, facility impacts, workforce impacts. During COVID, we've seen a glimmer of what's also going to come in a climate crisis. By 2030, 1 billion people will join us on this planet, and we'll need 25% more energy, 35% more food, 40% more water compared to 2015. And in many cases, we're not really prepared for those impacts. So that was the depressing bit. For businesses, we know that all of these changes are going to mean higher operational costs, less profit, and nearly half of businesses, as you heard, really don't have a plan yet to manage those risks. But the thing that I'd like to focus on today is really that for all of the challenges that we see in cities and for our communities, we do have some really wonderful solutions that help with all of these problems at once. And I don't like to use the term silver bullet because there is no silver bullet, but nature as a tool, as the oldest, newest technology that can help us deal with all of these impacts, can also help make us more resilient and more nimble to future climate change impacts. And it's nature that's been designed and engineered for water quality and for human health. We have 40 years of peer-reviewed research that shows nature provides solutions. And it doesn't even need to be large nature. Small amounts of nature can help. It doesn't need to be wild. Guided by strong science and engineering, we can use nature-based solutions to strengthen our lands, waters, and cities. Nature can be a filter that filters all of that polluted storm water. It gives us cleaner air in our communities, reduces flooding, improved walkability. Again, 40 years of peer-reviewed research from across various disciplines shows us that people living near nature are 3 times more active. They walk more. It adds thousands of dollars to your home value. Lots less property crime. Peer-reviewed study from the University of Washington showed that people who take walks in nature actually think they're walking, they perceive their walk to be shorter if it's around nature than if there's not nature. So you end up not just being healthier, but also building social cohesion, pulling people together, lowering stress and depression. Nearby nature doesn't just connect us, but it helps us, it also helps our businesses by making employees more productive and increasing our attention and focus. People tend to shop more and buy more in malls that have more nature, one peer-reviewed study showed. And it's not just there was one study, that one of my favorite studies, that showed that employees that if they're next to a window, they actually have increased attention, increased focus, and more productivity. But it's not just that. If you're staring at a calendar of nature, not even real nature, you also get the benefits. That it is we're so hardwired to appreciate and love nature, and it makes us better people. Kids learn better when they get to school if they take a walk along a tree-lined street on their way to school. It lowers the need for ADHD medicines, and kids can concentrate better. And in an increasingly connected world where kids are on more and more technology, which has opened up wonderful new places for kids and made them more globally connected, nature, increasing their connection with nature and bugs and dirt and all of that stuff also has a demonstrated positive effect on kids, not just in our community, but around the world. There was one peer-reviewed study out of Boston with Harvard Medical School and Harvard School of Public Health that watched a group of 100,000 women over an 8-year period and showed that women who live near nature have a 12% decreased mortality rate and significantly less. The strongest associations were significantly less mortality from respiratory illness and cancer. Women who are pregnant, who are in nature while they're pregnant, will have babies with higher birth rate, and kids who are around nature will have stronger immune function. It helps us age more gracefully. It helps us provide connection and keeps our brains strong as we age. The benefits go on and on and on. So how is it that we can incorporate this nature into strong and equitable ways into our world that help with the climate change, that help with systemic racism and inequities in our community, and make us stronger in the face of a changing climate? One story about one study that I also really love is about, I think it came out of Harvard University, and it showed that you actually heal faster if you look at nature while you're healing. And that this really landmark study led the UMass Hospital to add, when they were adding a new surgery center to the roof of their building, they actually created these recovery rooms where a patient would face a nurse for the first few hours right out of surgery, so that they could see their eyes and make sure that they were doing well coming out of brain surgery. And then once they were through that critical period, the entire room, all of the bed and all of everything in that room actually flipped and then faced out into this beautiful, beautiful bamboo garden. They didn't do that just because it was pretty. They did it because it lowers infection rates and got people out of the hospital faster, which made room for more patients. We are increasingly seeing that more and more businesses are investing in nature in big ways. They know it's the way to attract talent, and yeah, they know it's the way to keep people engaged with their company. So the question for me is how might we all, and how might our companies or businesses or organizations engage in ways that support the expansion of nature in our communities and support dealing with climate change impacts and clean water, but also plays to our core strengths. And many of the challenges that we talked about are population growth, climate change impacts. Well, we know that they are difficult for us. They also provide us with really great opportunities. Nearly half of what will be built serving our commercial and industrial sectors doesn't exist yet, which gives us a great new possibility for developing and building those new buildings in new ways and radically reimagining how our cities and towns are not just using old tools, but they're good for nature and good for people. I have recently gotten to know Paul Hawken, who wrote the book Drawdown, which has been said it's the most comprehensive. I think he said it about himself after looking, but the most comprehensive plan to address greenhouse gas reduction. And what the book Drawdown does is it picks 100 of the most high impact things you can do for drawing down greenhouse gas production. It takes that list, very positively framed, simple, action-oriented approach, and it takes those 100 actions and it ranked the list based on what was the highest impact. And he wrote this book a few years ago. It's been on the New York Times bestseller for many years. And what has been so powerful about watching this book take off has been all of the partnerships, both public and private, that have spawned out of this new way of approaching climate, and the new insights that emerge from the data. Surprisingly, the number one thing that the planet can do to draw down greenhouse gases is better refrigerant management. That is something that we don't really talk about all that much. Number 6 and 7 on the list are educating women and girls, and educating and empowering women and girls. If you combine them, it would actually be number 1 on the list. So this concept of developing a list, a positively framed list of performance-driven actions really sparked an idea for me and the Nature Conservancy and many of the folks that we work with to try and do the same thing around water. And this is an initiative that is just kicking off. We call this project the Water 100 Project, and we've pulled together scientists, policymakers, and engineers and experts from around the region to come up with 100+ things that we can do for water and resilience to climate impacts, many of those climate impacts, and then we bucketed those things based on sector. And now we're in the process of digging into the science and the math, the water math about potentially ranking this list. And the list, I'll say, has provided many opportunities for us. Just having this list in itself has provided many opportunities for us to engage with business leaders on how we want to approach action. And I want to try and use these last few minutes to tell you the story of 3 of my favorite business leaders who took a look at this menu of options of things that could be done for around water. And they tried to use their expertise, their knowledge from entirely different sectors and use that expertise towards thinking about water in a new way and how we build in a new way. This first example is an example a guy named Mark Gray who was a real estate developer, saw a video about how stormwater runoff kills salmon. A salmon submerged in stormwater runoff off of the 520 bridge will die in a matter of minutes. And if you take that dirty stormwater runoff from a highway and filter it through soils and compost, and then submerge the salmon in it, all of the salmon live. It was a very simple experiment, but it moved him to action. He was building a building, the building you see on the right, in the Fremont neighborhood. And Tableau software was going to be the tenant of this building. And he decided, like, hey, I have this building site. I can see all of these downspouts off of this building. Why don't I just convert all of my landscaping to rain gardens? And poof, I will clean all of this water that is currently running into the Lake Washington Ship Canal, where all of the salmon going through the Ballard Locks pass in front of his building. And he did it. It inspired a new way of dealing with highway runoff in public-private partnership that got the attraction of the legislature and is inspiring other real estate developers to do the same thing. The second story is a guy named Peter Janicki, literally a rocket scientist. He built satellites and parts for NASA and SpaceX out of his Seadrill-Woolley factory. And he worked with Bill Gates to produce a machine that would clean dirty water and wastewater, and it was for communities in Africa and around the world. And he worked with Bill Gates. A dairy farmer in literally neighboring his property practically saw this machine that he built in Africa to turn human waste into clean water, and said, how come, can we do this from dairy waste? So he's working with dairy farmers in Seadrill-Woolley and northern Puget Sound to build a new machine. I call it a dairy distiller that turns manure into clean water and energy. And he did this using his engineering expertise from an entirely different sector. The Boeing company has been a big support, a longtime supporter of clean water action in Puget Sound. They manage stormwater permits. They own a lot of impervious surfaces and have a lot of expertise related to managing those impervious surfaces. And they knew, stormwater engineers at Boeing knew that the problem with porous pavement that water can flow through getting it back into the soil systems to clean rather than running off. They knew the most difficult part of that was the strength, that current porous pavement couldn't hold trucks or buses or weight. So they thought, what if we were able to take carbon waste fiber from our airplane production, take the waste stream, chop it up, mix it up with porous pavement, and then turn it into a new product to increase the tensile strength. They worked with Washington State University to do this, and lo and behold, it didn't just increase the tensile strength, it also cleaned the water even before it got through the soil to the soil. So the carbon fiber waste is serving as a carbon filter as well. And they're now looking at scaling that. Vulcan Real Estate has built a new building in South Lake Union where they are working with the city of Seattle to take all of the stormwater, the dirtiest stormwater in the city. The dirtiest is from North Capitol Hill, the residential neighborhoods of North Capitol Hill. And the pipe that carried that stormwater ran right underneath their property in South Lake Union as it was on its way to Lake Union. They took all of that dirty stormwater, day-lit it, are running through swales and rain gardens in front of their building, putting it back into a pipe, and then sending it now clean out to Lake Union. And this was a way that they used their landscape to treat the stormwater of a 400+ acre neighborhood with one project and innovative thinking and innovative design, essentially making North Capitol Hill a water neutral neighborhood. All of these ideas show up on this Water 100 list. I think of this as kind of a menu of ingredients that businesses can pull from to try and figure out what is essentially the best way for us to invest in sustainability in ways that plays to our core strengths. And I think that's what we can ask from businesses, is not to go necessarily to go out of their wheelhouse, but how do we invest in mobilize private land and get to net positive water, like Microsoft just made the commitment for net positive water by 2030, mobilize private dollars and private voice to advocate and invest in organizations doing great work, but also to invest private sector expertise and knowledge to become innovators and demonstrate global leadership, which we have in abundance here in the Pacific Northwest, to develop new game-changing and performance-driven solutions. Thank you so much for your time today. I just want to let you know any of the research, peer-reviewed research that I mentioned today is all available on our website. And I really appreciate your time today and hope that the discussion will continue on how we can invest in more substantive ways that not only help us deal with climate change and water issues, but also help make our communities more resilient and to thrive economically. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jessie, and thank you so much to the Nature Conservancy. We really appreciate all of that information. And Jessie is going to stay with us as a panelist. So if you do have questions for Jessie, again, if you are an attendee for Zoom, go ahead and type those into the Q&A. If you have questions for her and you're watching on Facebook, you can type those into the comment section on Facebook, and we will do our best to get to those shortly. So again, thank you so much. It is now my distinct pleasure to be able to introduce to you some of the Pacific Northwest top sustainability leaders so that we can talk about challenges, opportunities, and strategies for creating greener practices, much as Jessie described during her keynote. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists. First, Julian Lowe of Puget Sound Energy. He is the local government affairs manager and a board member for Seattle Southside Chamber of Commerce. Puget Sound Energy is proud to serve our neighbors and communities in 10 Washington counties. It's the state's largest utility, supporting 1.1 million electric customers and nearly 900,000 natural gas customers. Julian, I believe we have a little video that you wanted us to share, and we will share that video and then turn the mic over to you. Does that sound good?
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm Julian Lowe, Local Government Affairs Manager for Puget Sound Energy, and it's an honor to participate on this panel. Very humbling to follow Jessie as always. I think that, clearly she's talked about how it's really going to take us all to achieve a more sustainable future here in the Pacific Northwest and around the world. Puget Sound Energy, as you can see there, just like Jessie had mentioned, works to forge relationships with all our customers and those who are throughout our service territory and also beyond. And renewable natural gas is an exciting energy source. Certainly Jessie's familiar with that. In her work at King County, Puget Sound Energy has worked to provide biogas and renewable natural gas in our partnership with King County Department of Natural Resources and Parks. And so, again, I think that's a key theme that you'll hear from certainly not just us, but many of us on the panel as well. Really appreciate hearing from Commissioner Calkins earlier. What I also wanted to mention is that Puget Sound Energy has a really exciting program known as Green Direct. We recently had go online the state's first Western Washington wind farm, and the Port of Seattle is drawing renewable energy from that wind farm in Thurston and Lewis counties. And so, again, value all our partnerships with the public and private sector. And, PSE continues making great strides in terms of sustainability. And last week, we just announced our Beyond Net Zero Carbon goal, where we set an aspirational goal to be a Beyond Net Zero Carbon company by 2045. This means PSE will target reducing its own carbon emissions to net zero and go beyond by helping other sectors to enable carbon reduction across the state of Washington. This pledge has three main elements. One, PSE operations and electric supply of carbon emissions. So our commitment to reducing emissions from PSE electric and gas operations and electric supply to be net zero by 2030. And by 2045, PSE will have a 100% carbon-free electric supply. Two, PSE natural gas sales for customer end-use carbon emissions, and our aspirational goal to reach net zero carbon emissions for natural gas sales by 2045. This includes customer use in homes and businesses with an interim target of a 30% emissions reduction by 2030. And finally, going beyond PSE reported carbon emissions, our goal is to partner with customers and industry to identify programs and products that cost effectively reduce carbon across sectors and across our region and state. Examples include EV implementation and the support of low carbon fuels, upstream methane emissions reductions, and RNG projects for municipal solid waste, agricultural waste, and forestry resources. PSE will take steps that include eliminating coal power and increase our use of alternative fuels for power generation, modifying tariffs and incentives to mitigate natural gas load growth, including changes to the line extension policy and appliance incentives, expand customer programs such as energy efficiency and demand response paired with increasing utility scale renewables like solar and wind, and local distributed renewables and associated electric transmission, and electrify most of our fleet vehicles by 2030 and use lower carbon fuels for fleet vehicles that can't be electrified and offset remaining emissions by 2030. And so we're really excited about this pledge and definitely look forward to working with all our customers to realize it. Certainly a critical component will be balancing our clean energy goals with customer expectations for uncompromised reliability, safety, and affordability. Knowing that this is going to be an ongoing conversation, we'll be convening an external advisory committee with representation from a diverse set of community members, partners, technical experts, and others. And so definitely look forward to talking with you more about this, but definitely looking to hear from our other panelists as well. Thank you again so much for this great opportunity.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Julian. Now our next panelist is Casey Mclean of SR3. The 3 R's are for response, rehabilitation, and research. Casey is a licensed veterinary technician who has a degree in marine biology and a long-standing passion and experience in marine animal medical care, rehabilitation, and conservation. She has worked in areas of sea turtle rehabilitation, terrestrial wildlife rehab, and marine mammal rehab for over 12 years. She is an active member of the Marine Mammal Stranding Network in the Puget Sound and works on a variety of marine animals, including stranded seal pups, sea otters, and sea lions. Casey is also a trained oil spill responder. Casey, we're so happy that you could be with us today and just talk to us a little bit more about SR3.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. You can hear me okay? Okay, great. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Casey Mclean, as Andrea mentioned, and I'm the Executive Director of SR3, Sea Life Response, Rehab, and Research. I'm also our veterinary nurse, because that is my passion and where my specialty lies. And I am one of the founders of the organization as well. So for those of you that might just be learning about us or hearing about us for the first time, I wanted to give you a little bit of background. We are a nonprofit, and the drive to form this nonprofit really came from myself and a few others recognizing that there was a really critical gap in resources and research for marine mammals and sea turtles in our region. You're not hallucinating. We do have sea turtles off the coast of Washington. We can talk about that another time. But in order to provide better care and increase our understanding of the health of the ocean overall, we saw that these 3 programs, what Andrea mentioned were our 3 R's, the response, rehab, and research, really needed to increase. So we started these field programs, and what they essentially do are provide medical care for sick and injured marine animals. We do things like free entangled whales. And then we also do a lot of different types of research, mainly focused on the health of whales and dolphins, most notably that of our endangered southern resident killer whales, but also for many others, other species that are around this area and around the world. So the most exciting thing that SR3 has been up to over this past year that I wanted to share with you guys is that we are opening the first marine specialty hospital in the Pacific Northwest. And we're doing that right down the street in the Des Moines Marina. And despite 2020 challenges, I am thrilled to say that we will be fully operational in the next few weeks. So that's very exciting. I hope that all of you will have the opportunity, once things are a bit safer, to come down and visit us. And I think everybody, has alluded to different things throughout this presentation, but we all know why protecting our environment is so important. And I think you all know that the threats to our oceans and our marine life are so rapidly changing and increasing that scientists truly can barely keep up with what is the biggest threat and how do we address it. Entanglements are now the leading cause of death for marine animals. We are seeing cancer in marine animals. We're seeing antibiotic resistance. There are plastics in the tiniest of creatures in the deepest crevices of the ocean. And, you add that to all the other environmental problems we face, and it can feel overwhelming and insurmountable And if you're like me, it kind of makes you want to stick your head in the sand some days. So you are not alone if you feel that way at times. But I wanted to express that even as an environmental organization, we are very conscious of our impact on the planet, but we're not perfect either. And I think that's something I really would like to bring forward in the panel today, is that as small businesses, it can be really challenging to make that investment, or maybe not even possible to make the investment in things that are more kind to our planet and the environment. And I wanted to encourage you that perfection is not required to make a difference. I saw they just flipped the slide to that, it's only one straw said 8 million billion people. We can do these small things and we can have a big impact. And I want to encourage you today to celebrate those impacts and talk about some ways that you can do that. And maybe by partnering with nonprofits like SR3 or the many others that are doing awesome work in our community. So thanks for having me today, and I look forward to the discussion.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Casey. Really appreciate it. Our next panelist is Kirk Myers of Alaska Airlines. Kirk is the Director of Sustainability for Alaska. He joined in 2018 and leads Alaska's sustainability strategy initiatives, goals, metrics, and disclosures to advance corporate goals for environmental and social impact. He specifically focuses on climate, waste, green building, and aviation-specific opportunities such as sustainable aviation jet fuel. Kirk also loves exploring our iconic national parks with his 2 young sons and serves on the board of the Washington National Park Fund that supports our 3 iconic parks here in Washington. Kirk, we're so proud that you have you with us today. So welcome. Excited to hear a little bit more about Alaska Airlines.
Thank you all. And I'm really excited to be on this panel and share just a few minutes of some of the new things that we're looking at as we come out of this challenging year, both for airlines and for so many businesses. I am really excited. There are many people on the panel who I know, and so some new folks who I'm being introduced to, but just want to recognize how great of a collection of voices this is with different skill sets and experiences. So I'm Kirk Myers, Sustainability Director at Alaska, and I've been here in the Northwest since about 2007. I came up here with REI and then shifted to Alaska about 2.5 years ago. And again, working on the sustainability work in Alaska, which covers a broad spectrum of things. Our focus, what we call our LIFT program, really is about 4 different pillars of work. And so it's our focus on people, both our employees, our guests, and our communities, flying greener. And so our long history of working to both innovate and also pursue different collaborations to drive down our environmental impact and increase the positive impact where we can of what our business does. Investing for strong communities and a deep connection to our West Coast communities they fly to, as well as making flying matter, which is really thinking about how do we use the power of aviation for good, and whether that's with flying honor flight veterans out to DC or doing other things along those fronts. I'm just going to talk really briefly today with 2 of the different innovations that we have really under the Fly Greener side. Before I go to the next slide, it has been for so many of us a challenging year. Aviation, we felt the pain significantly, just massive need for rethinking in really assessing what our opportunities are moving forward very differently. So through this year of immense kind of values conversations and kind of questioning and looking at what does Alaska really provide in terms of our service to the world besides aviation, we've really looked more deeply into our sustainability space that we've been involved in for so long, and are really focusing on how we engage our guests and our communities beyond as we move forward. So one example of kind of how this looks differently, and I can go to the next slide now, is around this thing that we launched last fall with Microsoft called Renewable Routes. And so as we've been a long partnership with Microsoft, a long history and long relationship, we started a conversation with them to jointly ask the question, what does travel look like as we move forward in this new world, in this new way? And what we launched with Microsoft, and I think the slide mine's a little bit slow here, so it'll probably pop up here in a second, so you'll see that. But we launched with Microsoft is the concept of taking some of their corporate business travel flights, their seats that they fly in Alaska, and matching and balancing that impact, the carbon footprint impact, with the equivalent amount of sustainable aviation fuel to essentially make routes from Seattle to the Bay Area for Microsoft on Alaska, as well as Seattle to LA, some of the top routes that they have, make them carbon neutral, make them sustainable. And Microsoft is obviously a fantastic local leader in the sustainability space. in this area. And it really is, as we've thought about how we know that there's an impact in Alaska. We spend a lot of time working on efficiency and reducing our carbon footprint, working on sustainable aviation fuels. But it really is, the future for us is about partnerships, right? And figuring out how can we solve some of the challenges that we face and start to address those more collectively. So this launch is a pilot. It's something that we are doing with Microsoft and are committed to for the long term. We hope to see it grow and also grow to more potentially participating companies in many different ways, but hope to drive that forward. I love this quote from Judson Althoff, who's the commercial sales leader at Microsoft. He believes in travel. We believe as we return to the sky, the travel routes will return. And this opportunity that we had with Microsoft was really to get ahead of the climate challenge that we face with aviation, because the climate crisis can't wait. So I know that the Port of Seattle with Commissioner Calkins and with Leslie is on the call, and so they're very much tied up in this similar work of how do we drive our economy, how do we connect people in ways that have less and less impact on the environment. The other thing that we've launched and we announced last fall also is the next slide. And this is something I'm very, very excited about, especially with the Port of Seattle on board, is that we've had a long history of offering voluntary carbon offsets to our guests. That's been many, many years of kind of having that offering. We haven't made it very visible. We've got a lot of opportunity in that space. But as we were looking at our program and really saying, what's the best way to move forward? We've been tracking for a long time. The airport created a carbon offset program called the Good Traveler. And so this was SeaTac, this was the San Diego airport, some of their leading airports convening and saying, hey, instead of creating all these different one-off carbon offset programs, let's collectively make a single brand essentially, and have a single framing, a single program that allows for more awareness, for easier storytelling, and much more broad engagement with the flying community. And so Alaska, we joined this last fall, and we're the first airline to actually add our weight and our support to trying to raise awareness and really not only have guests buy more carbon offsets to reduce their impact, but really share the messaging, right? Share the word, share the education, and really increase that awareness of what some of the opportunities are that we can do and choices we can make together and collectively as we look to reduce our impact as we all get back to travel. So that's really exciting. We've got a lot of work to go on. We're planning on making this much more visible to our Alaska customers if you happen to be one of them. So potentially through areas like the purchase path or things to really drive additional awareness and engagement with this as we all return to travel. So 2 examples just of different thinking, both of which really, I think in a sustainability sense, really frame around this need for collaboration, for partnering with others, because the solutions that we're facing are so oftentimes large that we obviously can't solve them ourselves. And we also get these interesting cross-sector collaborations that allow us to really go bigger, right, and have more momentum and be able to drive bigger outcomes coming out of it. So a couple of things on our side. I look forward to some questions in the conversation coming up.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kirk. Really appreciate it. Our next panelist is Leslie Stanton. Leslie Stanton is the Senior Manager for Environmental Strategy and Sustainability for SeaTac International Airport, which is operated by the Port of Seattle. She leads a team of sustainability professionals to develop and promote initiatives focusing on climate protection, sustainable transportation, green buildings, waste reduction, and recycling and education outreach. Leslie, so happy that you could be with us here today.
Thanks, Andrea. I just have, thank you. I think just leaving it on that slide is fine. So thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, particularly to talk to the business community and other folks in the community. Ryan Calkins, Commissioner Calkins, provided, I think, a really good overview of many of our programs, and so I won't take a lot of time to repeat what he said, but I'll just give you a general sense of how we think about this, and really to focus a bit on the question of the economic and financial and business aspects of this, and what would be more what would pertain to the business community. So the way that we think about it at the port, and I feel really lucky to be working at the Port of Seattle, which runs the SeaTac Airport, and I'm the sustainability manager for the airport, is that it's an organization whose mission is both to advance economic development, but also protect our communities. And so that just creates a really interesting space for us where we're interested in both. And sometimes it can feel like those things conflict, but many times they don't. They actually align really well. So there are sort of 3 buckets here that I'll just cover the way that I think about this and how the port and the airport in particular does its work to leverage this change. And it's really about the things that we do directly in our terminal and how we have our own operations. And that's everything from greening up our fleets, to using renewable natural gas. And then there's also the connections that we have with our business partners. And those are direct contracts and things like that, where we can also work with them to leverage change and increase requirements for them if they want to work with us at the airport. And then the last piece of our work really spreads to the broader community, and it's about advocating and working more broadly to provide support to create that change and move us to a renewable energy economy. And I'll talk a bit about those kinds of things. So just kind of to focus on what we do more within our own walls is, again, of course, we're doing the basic things like greening up our fleet, providing electric vehicles for our employees to move. We also have a fleet of 44 buses that brings folks to the rental car facility, and that is part of what we did to use this renewable natural gas. Those buses run on natural gas. We have a large contract that we signed for renewable natural gas earlier last spring, and as Commissioner Calkins mentioned, that's reduced our carbon footprint, particularly from those buses, and it reduced about 3,000 tons a year from those buses, just that alone. So it was a really phenomenal initiative that we did. And I'll just comment here, we didn't pay a price premium for the renewable natural gas in our buses. And that's because federal credits apply to transportation fuels, and we were able to avoid those very serious price premiums that can often deter folks from using renewable fuels. We also use that renewable gas in that contract to heat our terminal. So the terminal runs on natural gas to heat it. Obviously, we use electricity like the rest of the region, which comes from hydro. So the main part of our carbon footprint for the terminal comes from those boilers, and we are using that natural gas for that. And that's enabled us to reduce our port-wide port-owned emissions by 50%, reaching our 2030 goal actually about 10 years early. So we're pretty excited about that. So the other piece that we do, as I said, is work with our business partners. And the photo here is just showing our taxis and our TNCs, where we require them to be much more efficient and to reduce their carbon emissions if they want to operate at the airport. And so that program's been going on for many years. We started with the taxis, requiring them to use 45 miles vehicles that are 45 miles a gallon or better. The TNCs emerged as that marketplace developed, and we also have similar requirements for them. And I will say that the TNCs have actually, and taxis have been able to exceed our requirements. And so they've done really well in terms of reducing their emissions, still maintaining that competitive bent at the airport. They're not losing any business, and those drivers are saving money as they reduce their fuel use. So that's a really good example of, I think, a win-win for sustainability. The last piece, sort of internally and with our business partners, that I'll talk about is this new program where all of our building and construction projects, any new building projects that we're doing, have to go through a sustainable project framework analysis. And that just requires the folks that are building that project to analyze options to reduce emissions. And that includes everything from just how the facility is functioning, but also the materials that we use. And within that, we're starting to look at contracts to purchase like concrete and steel, and requiring folks that provide that, they want to purchase from, to reduce those upstream emissions and that embodied carbon with that fuel. And that sends a really nice market signal to folks that are producing those materials. If they make their facilities more efficient and they reduce that embodied carbon, they are then more competitive if they want to compete for projects at the port. So that's a really good, another example of how we can use our ability to leverage some of that change, even if it's outside our own walls. So, and just a couple more things on that. We do require restaurants to use recycled or compostable serviceware, which is obviously a very, very serious issue in terms of single-use plastics and the pollution that's causing just a incredibly severe problem. So we want to continue to reduce those single-use plastics and make sure that all of our restaurants are using compostable and or recyclable. And we're probably trending even more to just compostable to reduce our waste even further. And I will say on that one, there's not much of a premium for those businesses in our restaurants. Many of them are small businesses, so we don't want to put extra burden on them. What we do is we don't charge for taking care of recycling and composting at the airport. We do charge them for their garbage. So we send a bit of a market signal there that they can save some money by converting to compostable and or recyclable. The last thing I want to comment on just really quickly here is this broader community issue. The port is also, we obviously work with lots of business partners and lots of government partners. We're also able to advocate for legislative change. So we are advocating for a low carbon fuel standard and many of the other carbon reduction pieces of legislation that are being debated right now in the state legislature, and able to provide, real world examples of how those different pieces of legislation can help us pursue our goals. And that's something I feel really good about, that we're able to really have conversations with legislators and other businesses and folks that are interested in learning about those pieces of legislation, and help resolve at least some of the questions around, say, price of fuel. Clearly, California has had a low carbon fuel standard for many years, and there's been no increase in fuel prices there due to that program. So we feel really good about saying, yeah, there may be some impacts for some of the renewable technologies, but the low carbon fuel standard doesn't appear to be having an adverse impact in that way. And then another thing that we do is provide additional research. We recently completed a study with Washington State University looking at what would be the cost to develop a sustainable fuel production facility in the region, and what are the feedstocks that could be used, and helping us to create that baseline research. We obviously don't produce renewable fuels, or we don't have any manufacturing or production facilities, but we certainly want to help the broader community learn more about that and make informed decisions. So with that, I will pause, and we can have more discussion about this in our panel discussion.
Perfect. Thank you again so much, Leslie. And our final panelist that's joining us here today is Elizabeth Sorzard with the Recology King County, who works with Recology's Waste Zero Manager. In her role at Recology, she manages education and outreach programs in communities throughout the Puget Sound area, as well as a team of outreach staff. Elizabeth develops and implements innovative waste reduction programs for residential, multifamily, and commercial customers, delivering educational presentations and providing technical assistance to businesses, schools, community associations, and organizations. She has been with Recology for over 7 years, specializing in behavior change programs. Elizabeth earned her BA in Environmental Studies with minors in Law, Societies and Justice, and Human Rights from the University of Washington. Go Huskies. Elizabeth, please tell us a little bit more about Recology and what Recology is doing to help businesses and families make better, more sustainable choices.
Thank you for having us here, Andrea. So for those of you that are unaware of who Recology is one of the main garbage recycling and compost haulers here in King County. We service 10 municipalities, including Burien, Des Moines, SeaTac, and Maple Valley in South King County. The company as a whole has 40 operating companies, including here in Washington, Oregon, and California. Recology prioritizes sustainability through our daily operations, as well as our outreach and education programs that we offer to the communities that we serve, which of course is my bread and butter that we can talk about. First off, we recognize that we're in an energy intensive industry, both with our fleet and our facilities. Company-wide, our goal is to have 90% of our fleet powered by renewable or alternative fuel sources by 2022. Currently across the board, so all 40 operating companies, we're around 80%. Here in Washington, we're at 84% of our fuel is powered by renewable or alternative sources. In Washington, we're also piloting a full range electric collection truck to explore electrifying our fleet, which is very exciting. It just launched fully last year. And we understand a big share of our overall emissions come from our fleet, and it's also the area that we can control. Furthermore, on the facility side, 6 out of our top 10 energy intensive processing facilities are 100% carbon free. And 91% of our electricity used at our facilities is generated by carbon-free sources or renewable energy. Lastly, Recology partners with local businesses to support their sustainability and waste reduction goals. And as I mentioned, that's really where my heart and passion lies. And we work closely with businesses in the community to improve waste diversion. And I'm going to be discussing our resources later in the panel. We are very proud of our achievements in sustainable practices, and we plan to continue to improve and prioritize sustainability in our operations and through our work with municipal partners. Similar to all of the other panelists you have heard, partnerships are so crucial to sustainability in general, and I'm happy to dive into that as well. Thank you, and I can't wait to start our discussion.
Perfect. Great. So let's get right to it then. All of our panelists, you should be able to start your video and unmute yourself so that you can participate in the discussion. For those who are joining us on Zoom, again, go ahead and type questions into the Q&A function. Those that are joining us on Facebook, please type your questions into the comments section. Our first question that we want to tackle really does focus on, how businesses can take steps today to be more responsible stewards of our environment. Casey, you talked about how, perfect, is not necessary, but just, small things really can make a difference. How can we move forward and encourage businesses, or what can businesses do to be more sustainable so that we can start helping families and businesses save money, as we all need to save money, right? We're in an economic crisis. Every little bit helps to save the environment and save our bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to stop looking at some of these things that I think a lot of people term as small so negatively. I think I'll see people often on social media post something that they've done, even as simple as replacing disposable silverware in their office with, actual real silverware that people wash and reuse. And the comments sometimes are horrid. They're down, oh, that's the best you can do. It's a step and it makes an impact. And if everyone did it, imagine the big difference there would be. So, I really encourage you to do little things like that. I also think for your business, if you have, at least a small group of employees, make it fun. Do something like celebrate Plastic Free July and post on your social media or send out emails about how you're doing that and celebrate it. It's okay to celebrate the small wins. Actually, I really think you should. So I just want to encourage people to do that. There's a lot of things, we're in the medical field. There's a lot of things that we can't control. So don't let those things get you down. Maybe consider looking to your neighboring businesses and seeing if there's a way that you can go in together for your recycling services or composting if you don't want to take that on just by yourself. Other things I think about often are, people get really like, oh, well, I can't do solar panels, or I can't do this, $20,000 upgrade to make this huge impact. I guess I just won't do anything. Well, maybe look at partnering with other local organizations, from Nature Conservancy to SR3 to all of the really amazing people that are doing work out there, and see if you can do like a 1% for the planet type of deal, or some way get your group together and go do a volunteer day with these organizations. I guess I would term that kind of as mitigation. It might not be a huge project that's going to immediately do these carbon reductions and things like that, but it is making a difference. So just some words of encouragement.
Well, I'll go ahead and jump in there. That was a tee up for me here. Please do call your local power utility, to whether it is on solar, but then also on other elements as well. I want to just touch on that really quickly. PSE developed the Solar Choice Program a few years back, and for those who cannot place solar on their rooftops for either structural engineering reasons or given how their roof faces, PSE constructed a project in Kitsap County, and so folks can buy blocks based on their use at their home or business. And that solar energy will be added to the grid on their behalf. One of these things I'll do in the chat is we encourage you, if you are in our service territory, to consult with one of our energy advisors. And, while it may not be solar, it could be LED lighting or occupancy sensors, steps to save water, upgrades to your HVAC system, and refrigeration. And what we'll do is we'll send an energy advisor out, certainly social distanced, of course, providing a no-cost comprehensive assessment and energy savings report. We'll share a proposal including energy efficiency and upgrade opportunities if you're eligible. Installation of no-cost and low-cost energy saving products, ways to reduce energy use and savings on your bill, and then also, again, hopefully leading to an improved work environment for employees and customers. And, certainly one of the things that I think has certainly been put at the forefront of this is, recognizing that we need to make, more sustainable economy available for everyone. And so we recently partnered with some businesses owned by members of communities of color throughout our service territory to make those upgrades to their businesses. And so that was ranging from everywhere from Bellingham all the way to Olympia. And so again, that's going to be an ongoing conversation, certainly, but making sure that there's a sustainable future for all of our communities is certainly one of our priorities as well.
I'm happy to.
Oh. You want to go ahead, Elizabeth? I'll jump in after that.
So every time I talk to a community member or business owner, and the word sustainability is a little scary because it does, for a lot of people, it means I do have to invest a lot of money into becoming more sustainable, as Casey mentioned, but that's not the case. And I'm going to speak on behalf of what I love, and what's just an easy step is recycling and composting. So in general, garbage service rates are high, and then recycling has a very small fee, or it's usually free. And then compost service, again, similar to recycling, typically it's free, or there's a small fee. So the graphic that you see on the screen, you can see like a business has a container. They don't have recycling, they don't have compost. It's a pretty expensive bill. Once they incorporate recycling, once they incorporate compost, their bill starts to drop, as you can see with the different tiers. And my urge to all of the businesses on this call is reach out to your haulers, see what resources are available through your cities. You'd be surprised what resources you have access free of cost just to make those small changes, small incremental changes. I think what I love to tell individuals, we're not looking for perfection in sustainability. We're looking for everyone doing just small actions, and it's everyone doing sustainability imperfectly, because it will all contribute to the greater whole.
Thanks. I just would add to that. The way that we think about it is, yeah, of course, sometimes you're going to have to pay a premium, and but many instances, as Elizabeth just showed, you don't have to. If in many cases it does save you money. But what I will say too, and to get to what Casey commented on and Julian, is that each time you call your utility, or you call a company and say, I'd like this service, it does send that market signal. And that's what we did with our renewable natural gas contract. We would love to have bought it from Puget Sound Energy or somebody in the region, but quite frankly, just to be candid about it, to get that fuel for our boilers, I'm not talking about the bus fuel, but for the boilers, it was just wasn't available to us, because any renewable natural gas is going to California that provides more credits from their low carbon fuel standard and their cap and trade program. And so, of course, if you've got renewable natural gas, California is the place to be where you would sell it. But we still felt like it was important to send that market signal that we as the port do want to buy this fuel, and we do have these nice big boilers that will use a big chunk of it. And we were able to secure a contract. It took us several years to do it, but we were still able to send that market signal. And I think that's true for folks that call their utilities or call their airlines and say, I'd like to have a low carbon flight, or how can I reduce my garbage? Those are things that do let those companies and businesses businesses know that there is interest out there. And so maybe we won't get every straw out of the ocean, but we can certainly say, hey, I don't really need a straw. And that, as I think Casey pointed out really well, it starts to build, and then suddenly it becomes not just a small signal, but a big signal. And that's enough for a business to invest in and feel confident in that investment.
That's fabulous, Leslie. I'll chime in just with an additional thought. Ditto on everything that's been said. Is the one thing I think companies can also do is, as you take those steps, whether they're small or medium or large, is to tell your story, and both to your own internal employees and even more broadly. You'll be amazed at how much engagement you might get and how many more new ideas start to emerge when your employees have a sense that that you're headed down this path, and they're the folks who really know your business, know your operations, and know those next steps that one can take. And then also in terms of finding collaborative partners, you're all attending this call, and so I think there's interest. But just putting your interest out there and telling what steps you're doing will attract a lot more opportunities that you might not otherwise see.
I would add on to that to encourage you to collaborate with a local nonprofit that's doing work that you think is great and you want to support, and have them help you get the word out about what you're doing, because they have audiences that want to support small businesses or large businesses that are doing what we see as the right thing for the environment. So find somebody who can help you toot your own horn.
I appreciate that, Casey. I think, right behind me, together we are stronger, right? And, that is the founding principle of our organization. And no matter what system change you're trying to do, whether that's create more sustainable business practices, again, together we are stronger. So it always helps to reach out and, connect with the community. And I would also say, please lean on us. If you are a small business owner and you do want to take those next steps, but you're not really, sure who to reach out to, we can help introduce and facilitate that connection. So again, really appreciate that very much. In addition to some of the resources that we've already talked about, and actually resources that I've personally used, Recology picks up my garbage and recycling at home, and we noticed that when we were working and doing school at home, man, did our waste go up, right? The more you're at home, gosh, you're not eating out as much, and so we just found ourselves, just overflowing with our recycling bin, and then ending up, we're putting recycling products, into the garbage waste. And that was just, horrible, and led to, lots of fights within my family. All I had to do was call Recology and explain the problem. And, I got another, recycling bin, and so now I don't have to worry about that. Right. So I think that lots of times, especially small businesses and, individuals, we're so busy and we're so, pulled in so many directions that we don't just even take the time to ask the question. And so that's one thing that I would just encourage everybody to take the time and ask the question. And same with Puget Sound Energy. When we moved into our house, our floors were really cold. And so we would just crank the heat up. And then we had somebody do an energy audit, and it's like, yeah, we don't have any insulation. So, investing in some insulation in our home really cut down on our energy expenses. And so that's a great opportunity for your business or your home to do that energy audit. And sometimes, that small initial investment in a little, insulation, I know, it saved our family, thousands of dollars, over the, course of a couple of years. So any other, tips or tricks or resources that businesses could do, that the call ends today at 1, they can jump online or they can make a call?
Not necessarily a tip or a trick, but one encouragement is, and I mentioned this earlier, is getting your team out to volunteer with some of these organizations, planting trees, doing a cleanup, coming to a marine hospital, whatever it might be. I think that really helps you stick with your sustainability goals. It can be difficult sometimes, day in and day out, to keep up with these things and keep the investment. But if you spend that little bit of extra time seeing what difference you're actually making, I think that really can keep everybody motivated and encouraged.
I think to add to that, and Kirk had to hit the head with a hammer, or a hammer with a head. I don't know the exact phrase, but engagement and keeping your employees engaged, and whether it's on a quarterly basis, monthly basis, The businesses we've worked with in the past that have been very successful in maintaining their sustainability practices continuously educate and engage their employees. And I will commend both the airport in Alaska, because those are both of our customers, and we partner with them very closely to ensure if any changes come around that they're alerted so they can pass that on to their employees. And we're all resources here on the panel. So please, again, I cannot reiterate enough, reach out to your neighbors, reach out to experts, and we can point you in the right direction.
I will just make one comment on that. Thanks, Elizabeth. We love working with Recology and also with Alaska, obviously. I also think there's opportunity for any business to support its employees with commute trip reduction benefits. Can you provide an ORCA card? Can you, help people telework when they need to? We have bike facilities at the airport, not just for the travelers, but for our employees that dare to bike to the airport. We're trying right now to put in better infrastructure. We don't really want people biking too much around until we have really good bike lanes in there. But certainly you can, bike to certain parts of it. And we certainly would encourage that for many of the employees, not just the port employees. There's over 20,000 employees working at the airport. And we certainly want to make it a place where they feel like they can take any mode of transportation, and certainly would encourage low carbon modes. And we as an employer and as an owner of that facility have to work to make sure that infrastructure is available and that we support those modes.
Perfect. I appreciate that. And Jesse might have some ideas. So Jesse, you should be able to, there you go.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I just want to harken back to kind of my days when I worked for King County, and a study that I read about how businesses could encourage folks to bike commute. And there was a study that was done that showed businesses could do all sorts of things to encourage bike commuting. They could put in showers, they could put in bike facilities, they could have a bike to work week. But the single most effective thing that a business could do to promote bike commuting within their employees was for the CEO, the top executive, to bike themselves to work, for the employees to see them sweaty, maybe in their bike gear, hauling their bike through the lobby every morning. That is the single most thing. So as small business and large business leaders, the actions of the leaders within the organization sets a tone for what's okay, for what the risk appetite is for investing and inspiring and problem solving related to sustainability and conservation actions, especially if it's kind of outside the norm and the status quo. So as leaders, I just would encourage you to not just quietly go about your sustainabilities, but flamboyantly go about your sustainability actions, even if it means you're sweaty coming into a staff meeting, or making mistakes along the way, accidentally mixing your recycling in with your yard waste. We're all imperfect and we're all growing together, but as leaders, that is the single best thing we can do to inspire more people.
Yeah, I think there's a really great argument. Leslie mentioned commute trip reduction, CTR. Certainly, I know of a VP who in what we called the before times did commute in via bike. But on the issue of telework, it's really a competitiveness issue, and certainly, many of our companies, have had to step up in terms of whether it's VPN or other things. But I think it just all goes to show that it's not just good for the bottom line, but it's also really critical for attracting, the best and brightest employees out there. So I really appreciate you highlighting that point.
Perfect. Any other thoughts on that last question before we go into, we've got a lot of questions coming in, so I want to make sure we have a chance to answer them. Perfect. All right. So this question is from one of our Zoom attendees, Brian Frederick. Thanks again so much for being here. He's saying there's a lot of great ideas, products, services that we've talked about today, and it's very exciting. But is there any coordinated get these sustainability resources more widely distributed and acted on? So I know, I mean, there's the EPA, right? I mean, you know, there's again, I think part of it is, you know, there's certainly the regulatory bodies. I think that might be, you know, part of the conversation. You know, why is there not a central, you know, place, you know, where businesses or people can go to learn more about, you know, practices, or is there a go-to, you know, just kind of clearinghouse of information?
Andrea, I can maybe start us out. I think one of the challenges that I've seen is that so much, I love the EPA and our regulatory agencies, but sometimes their work is not positioned in the most inviting, voluntary way. And really, for us to meet these environmental challenges, I think I have realized we're not going to regulate our way out. We're not going to regulate our way to climate sustainability, to water sustainability, and the resilience of our communities. There is going to need to be a broad voluntary effort. And that's why I like to think about investing in multi-benefit solutions, so that and nature-based solutions, because you can invest in them for a variety of reasons, for climate and also for general livability and employee productivity. There is a real gap in providing a guide map, I think, for businesses. I work closely with the United Nations CEO Water Mandate, which is conveniently run out of the Pacific Institute in Portland and Bellingham. And the UN CEO Water Mandate is mainly geared more towards large businesses, but with a global footprint. But there's certainly a number of really wonderful tools on their website that I think are helpful even for small businesses trying to kind of get into the sustainability game. And all of those tools align with local to global targets. Part of the reason why Project Drawdown was created and why we're creating the Water 100 project was because I saw a gap in trying to create kind of this menu of opportunities in plain language, science-backed ways that was very engageable and provided a platform for partnership. There is a real gap in that space, but there are a few organizations trying to fill that gap in real time.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there is a gap. I mean, there's lots of things to do. And I think one of the reasons the panel was a little stumped when that question was asked was because sustainability is so broad, you know, would you really have one organization that could do it all and provide what I think Jesse was just talking about, which are straightforward, actionable ideas and recommendations. It's pretty tough to do. And it's a space that obviously is shown on the panel is continuing to evolve. So I think it's a really tough one. And I wonder if for a small business, a matter of picking one or two key issues that they want to focus on and then making sure they do a really good job on that. And if one year it's commute trip reduction for their employees, work with their employees to find out what they need and then implement a few things, then, you know, I think it's been commented on already that, you know, we're not going to be able to do everything, and it's going to take us a while. But I think until we get really clear direction, at least in terms of being able to figure out what is the right thing. I have to say, as being a professional in this space, I see a lot of junk come across my desk, like really silly stuff. And so I can understand why that would be challenging for a small business that doesn't have the resources. So, and I'll just say this last point on the commute trip, there's a place called Commute Seattle, which is a transportation management association, and many small businesses can start there if you want to learn about commute trip reduction options for a small business. And I'll leave it at that and let others chime in.
I'll ditto both Jesse and Leslie. It's a great question because it is so clean and clear where there should be a better answer, I think. For inspiration, if you're in a kind of for-profit company, there are some national organizations. So there's a group called Green Biz, so Green BIZ, that does a great job of kind of curating the media around the space and telling the stories of what mostly larger companies are doing in terms of innovation. So it's not necessarily a roadmap, but a great resource to look into their website, get onto some of their newsletters, as well as a group called Sustainable Brands that does similar sharing of kind of where these kind of innovative sustainability stories are, in Sustainable Brands case, kind of showing up in the product or in the kind of the customer facing side of companies. So there's a lot of inspiration there, but I'll ditto that there's not necessarily a clear roadmap, but kind of identify what matters to you and your employees. That's the place to start, really, and start that conversation, measure what you can, understand what your impact can be, and go from there.
One example I'll give from the marine field is fisheries and what seafood do I eat that's sustainable. It is constantly changing. It can change from season to season, year to year. It might change as fast as that fish can make it to your plate from the restaurant. So, they used to do these little printed things from Monterey Bay Aquarium to tell people what sustainable seafoods to eat. Oh, they've moved into an app, which we've moved into an app for everything, but they pretty much had to, because as fast as you could print it, it was wrong. And there's just so much debate on what sustainability really looks like from the fishing industry. There's not a lot of regulation. So I think some of those issues play into where can we find all this information and all these resources, because there's a lot of opinion on which one is right and which one isn't. So something else that plays into that.
I appreciate that. Anyone else before we go on to more questions? Perfect.
I did just flag in the chat that Seattle 2030 district provides a great roadmap for businesses on the energy and stormwater front if you have a facility footprint. And King Conservation District and our conservation districts, which are kind of this quasi public-private thing, were created to hold the hands of private landowners and businesses to help them make stronger sustainability decisions. So those are two great organizations that were specifically designed to help private landowners and businesses kind of hold their hand along the way.
I will add one more thing. As we all know, sustainability, massive, it's broad, and there isn't a one shoe fits all for how to become a more sustainable business. But if you are looking to start out, I recommend reaching out to cities that your business is in, because cities have their own sustainability initiative where they're trying to take on this broad spectrum of all these different sustainability projects. So they're already doing the building blocks of reaching out to nonprofits, private companies, to see how they can, as a city hall and as a city overall, reach these sustainability goals. So that would be a great place to start seeing like what resources are available, because most likely if you're looking for waste, they'll point to us. If they're looking for energy, they'll point to PSE. If you're looking for someone who can be a mentor for you because their business already went through this process of trying to choose which sustainability path to dive into, they'll connect you with like Alaska Airlines or SeaTac Airport. So there's definitely, it's all about connections. Again, together we are stronger, reiterating that.
Hashtag. Appreciate it. This question is from one of our Facebook attendees, and this is for you, Kirk. How close are we to seeing silent electric planes? And is there anything developing that's exciting kind of in that arena? I think if I remember right on Facebook, I did see that Alaska did a test flight with Boeing with a renewable energy aircraft. So maybe you can just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, great question. I will try and keep this as short as possible before I can geek out in this space for a very long time. So the question around electric, there's a lot of really interesting innovation happening right now with actually a lot of companies that are local here to Washington in terms of looking at new different types of fuels. So whether that's electrification, electric hybrid, hydrogen fuel actually for planes. And there are some test planes that are flying. In fact, on the electric side, Harbor Air seaplanes up in Vancouver now has an electric, basically converted to Havilland Beaver. The challenge in broad scale aviation, commercial aviation, is really around scaling that up, right? The weight, the cost, all of those things are really, really challenging. Jet fuel is actually really, really energy dense for its kind of volume and weight. So the main area where there's been a lot of innovation that we participate in a ton, and CTAC also has, Port Seattle has put a lot of time into, is around sustainable aviation fuel. So making those liquid fuels with 70 or 80% less kind of life cycle carbon emissions. So fuels that can significantly reduce. Calkins also talked about air quality. There are other co-benefits to it. So that's the most likely path over the next 20 years, really. But we at Alaska are tracking, and there are some companies who are doing the work around trying to understand how can we actually truly decarbonize aviation in interesting ways, and tons of stuff to go in that space. But we're a long way from electric or electric hybrid, especially at 737 scale. That's just such a massive technical challenge. But there are some innovations for smaller commuter planes that are potentially coming, and then sustainable aviation fuel is really the area where the industry has invested a ton of time and effort to really make that solution as viable as possible. It's still expensive, and we're kind of at that tipping point and hoping that the economies of scale come quickly. But geek out for a long time. Thanks for the question, though.
Yeah. And I just wanted to jump in here really quickly. I think Kirk's point is, well taken in some of the technical challenges right now. But we should feel really excited about the areas where we're already making progress in the transportation sector. So for instance, Puget Sound Energy has been proud to work with King County Metro to help provide the fast charging and charging at their bases and park and rides as King County Metro moves to an all electric fleet. One of the other areas is our PSE's Up and Go program, where I appreciate Jesse's comment about needing to educate the general public about sustainability, and that's a key component of our Up and Go program. Workplace electric vehicle charging is another area. Residential charging. Working with providing charging at multifamily properties. I know we're installing EV charging at a condominium complex in Kenmore, the north end of Lake Washington. And so again, whether it's your own personal vehicle or transit, that's certainly an area where not just Metro, but other agencies in our service territory are looking to go. And then also in the maritime sector, and the conversation that Washington State Ferries is moving towards regarding, a hybrid model whereby, those ferries leaving Coleman Dock in Seattle and then going to Bainbridge Island. That's certainly a discussion that Puget Sound Energy is participating in. And then finally, Puget Sound Energy is proud to partner with other utilities along the West Coast as we take a look at electrifying, the freight sector. And so that's something we're really excited about. Again, while there are those technical challenges in the aviation space, whether it's again your own personal vehicle, transits, maritime. There are steps that we are taking and doing work on now. But again, it's not going to be overnight, but it's something that, we're certainly taking on. And I know that Leslie probably can talk a little bit about some other electrification work that they're doing. Just wanted to tee that up for you, but it's something that I know they've been really excited about in terms of their ground vehicles at the airport.
Yeah, you mean, well, we are installing a lot of electric vehicle charging stations throughout the airport. There's obviously a lot of demand for it. And so even in our parking garage, we're adding 94 more charging stations so that when passengers come and park there, they can charge up. But it's also a key strategy for our for getting to and from the airport in terms of using a transportation network company, a TNC like Uber or Lyft. Many people have shifted to that mode to get to the airport. It's really quick and it's very direct. So we want, as I said, we already have with our service agreements with them requirements for them to reduce their carbon emissions, and our new service agreements with them give them extra credit for converting to electric. And we have to be able to provide EV charging stations to support that shift. And so we just got a grant for from the Department of Commerce to install 10 new EV charging stations in our TNC taxi holding lot, we call it. And that'll help provide even a larger fleet of vehicles that doesn't just operate at the airport, but that operates in the region, that will be able to get people to and from their destination, including the airport, with very low carbon emissions. So thanks, Julian, for teeing that up.
Perfect. I've got probably time for about 2 more questions here. One of the comments from one of our attendees is just saying, you know, how great this is, and we will be sending a post-attendee email that, you know, will include resources and contact information. So if you are, you know, frantically trying to write things down, just know we will be sending you a follow-up email, and we will not be able to get to all of the questions today as well. So we will do our best to coordinate that post-event so that you can get access to the information that you want. So again, this next question is related to just how much time we are spending on our screens, right? It's a lot, and so home energy usage is up. You know, are there any tips for reducing our energy consumption at home now that we are spending so much time on screens? One of the suggestions that has been floated around is, you know, just not encouraging people to put their cameras on, you know, when they're in Zoom meetings, that even just a simple thing like turning off your camera can, you know, reduce your energy consumption.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and take that one first. Just like we have energy saving tips for our small and large commercial customers, we have energy efficiency tips for our residential customers as well. And so whether that's smart thermostats, keeping your thermostats at a certain level, or just the basic thing of turning out the lights when you leave a room, those are all small things that can make a difference. You know, we have a VP, some of folks know, Andy Wappler, and he likes to joke that, you know, here at Puget Sound Energy, we are the worst sales people out there because we tell you to use less of our product. And so, again, you know, just doing those things, just doing some of those tips are really important. Some folks may have seen our claymation commercials about, you know, keeping doors closed and then also putting something underneath to keep the heat into a room, and those sorts of things. So happy to share those tips in the post report from this call, but we do have resources available.
I'll just add one note to that. Thanks, Julian. As I was thinking about that question, that's kind of course, we all want to save energy, but I was just, because we do so much on electric vehicles, it's interesting to me that the used car market has a lot of Leafs EVs that have, you know, been around for years, and they're very reliable. And I was surprised at how inexpensive they were. And I was thinking that would be a really easy way to reduce your carbon footprint if you, you know, can't afford a Tesla, and many of us can't. That would be just a great way to reduce your fuel costs. And if you need a new car, maybe getting a used Leaf is the way to go. So just a quick comment on that one.
I'll jump in just with something that I love to share. It's not necessarily aviation related, but thinking about your home use also, and this is maybe for ecology also. Always think about not just the impact of things that you throw away, but just reducing food waste. And I think that, you know, we think about energy within the home, and we're burning, and, you know, and Julian, the energy advisors are fabulous. So I do highly recommend that you call an energy advisor to get some additional insights into your own home. But think about that food waste, the embodied carbon, the embodied water that's in that stuff. I always joke, and maybe it's too appropriate during COVID, make sure you drink that last sip of beer that's in your glass, because it's important. And we at Alaska do think a lot about food waste, especially in the perishable side, as we think about our in-flight service. because it's not only an impact on the waste side, but it's also an impact on that kind of front of pipe and what it takes overall for the system to create that stuff. So now is a great time because you're sitting at home, many of us much more than we were before, to really look around and think about some of those efficiencies that you could make, but also maybe make your life a little bit easier on that front.
And if you're looking for some tips on how to store food in the fridge, because there is storing tips, King County has a great resource called Food Too Good to Waste. I have one of their magnets on my fridge on how to store them. I even have a section in my fridge that says eat first, because I know it's going to go bad quicker than other things in the fridge. So there's a bunch of different neat tricks, and I'm happy to, I can nerd out about this a lot, but there's a lot of resources out there, and we're happy to point you in the right direction.
Perfect, thank you. And so one last comment and then one last question. People are really excited to work with you, Casey, at SR3. And so as people want to sign up for volunteers, we'll be connecting a fleet of volunteers to you. So just as a heads up, you'll be getting a lot of emails for excited volunteers to help you with your work. And then this other question, again, related a little bit to recycling. There's a lot of kind of mixed information and news reports that are out there about just how effective recycling is right now and what's happening within the market. Just a last final thought on recycling and what consumers and businesses can do to lead that effort.
Of course, and you're right. Right now, the media and the knowledge about recycling, it can vary. My best tip is for businesses to check in with their current haulers and also cities. We have a very comprehensive list of what can and cannot be recycled. And it does change because manufacturers will create new packaging, and you're going to go to the store and buy a brand new product and it will come in material that you're not familiar with. So always ask. Our customer service lines are always available. They love answering the what goes where question. And to further that, if you're looking at your specific products at your business, feel free to reach out to Recology. We're happy to come by and do a waste audit. We've done this both at the airport and with Alaska to really look at what your employees are throwing away. I'm going to give you some highlight levels. So recycling, 5 items to get recycled: paper, cardboard, glass, metal, and plastic. Those are the only 5 items that you can put in your recycling bin. And all of recycling needs to be empty, clean, and dry. So empty out all that residual food. You can do like a quick rinse. What I like to share is with like a syrup bottle. It's really sticky substance. You can put about 1 inch of water, so you're not just using soap and a bunch of water from your sink. Screw the lid back on, shake it up a couple times, dump it out, and that's good enough to be recycled. Just make sure that there's no food that can rot essentially through the recycling process. And I will do a plug. We do a lot of workshops and a lot of presentations to educate your employees. So please feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to come and do a presentation for you. Of course, all virtual, and we even can create some customized videos for your business if you have particular products.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Oh, go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think one of the other kind of the recycling that often gets not talked about is the concept of carbon and nutrient recycling. We are really lucky in the Pacific Northwest and in the greater Seattle area to have yard waste that is yard waste and food waste that's picked up and turned into carbon and nutrient rich products in the form of compost. And that is a really wonderful way of recycling. It takes all that carbon and nutrient, puts it back in the ground to sequester it where it belongs. And from a water quality perspective, which is kind of my jam, it also makes your soil absorb water like a sponge. So like if you know, when you don't water your garden or you ignore your garden for a long period of time, such as I might do, the soil becomes hydrophobic. So the water just washes off of it. If you recycle carbon and nutrients, put that compost back on your soil, it holds onto that water like a sponge. and hold on to that, all of that storm water, preventing it from going into our lakes, rivers, streams, and Puget Sound, which is a really wonderful way of getting a double bang for your buck, the carbon benefit and the water benefit, just by recycling and using yard waste compost.
It's great. And then your yard looks better too. So like, as my kids say, we did a lot of adding compost to our yard, and my 10-year-old said, wow, it looks like people live here now. So, you know, it's a added bonus. And like Kirk said, it's just drink that last drop of beer. That's the other way to look at it. So again, just really want to thank all of our panelists and speakers for being here. We really do appreciate it. I am now putting all of our Zoom attendees into a random number generator so that we can choose our door prize winner. So it's an amazing picnic gift basket here. So again, you know, renewable from Heartwarming Treasures. So it's a great way to pack in and pack out your picnic and leave zero waste. And our winner is, hold please, Josh Gertzman. So Josh, I know you and we'll be contacting you so you can come and pick up your picnic backpack for 2. So again, thank you so much for being here. Again, you know, just want to say final thank yous that we really appreciate our sponsors. You know, we can't do these events without you and without your support. So we really appreciate our speakers and our panelists and our sponsors. We'll continue to produce webinars and these virtual events on subjects impacting our community, and we hope that you'll join us for the future. You can register for all of our webinars and virtual events on our website, SeattleSouthsideChamber.com. We know that providing opportunities to share information and connect will make our community stronger and ready for recovery. And we hope that you are able to join us for more of these opportunities. And if you or your company is able to donate to sponsor our work so that we can continue to serve our community in and through every challenge, it is greatly appreciated. And remember, again, we are stronger together. Have a great Wednesday, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Sustainable Southside.